Welcome to Douglas Robbins' Den of Discussion. Today we're speaking with corporate action hero John Davis. I'm just going to read you his bio because it's fascinating. John's background as a stuntman, fight director, college professor, artistic director, and comedian makes him an intriguing guest that draws your audience in and delivers real-world techniques for overcoming self-imposed limitations and achieving maximum potential even in times of adversity. And we're going to get back to that. After a serious back injury that left him paralyzed, John developed his 5F system of achievement. The system hacks the fight or flight response, shortening learning curves and increasing successful outcomes. Using the system, he regained his mobility and went on to perform over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting shows in 16 countries around the world. On 16 USO tours, John took his show to the front lines of both Iraq and Afghanistan from 2001 to 2006. John now is a highly sought after keynote speaker known as the corporate action hero. He delivers empowering programs to organizations globally. His programs are unique, out of the box, and even use bullwhips and nunchucks to develop his message. His website, www.corporateactionhero.com, you can go find him there. John, my friend, welcome.
Well, I'm so happy to be in the den of discussion.
Yes, that's a song. We need a soundtrack or a melody or something.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here. This is going to be really fun.
Thank you, John. So we spoke a little beforehand. So nice meeting you. Let's get back at it, because there's so much to discuss. And, it seems like you've done a ton and had a lot of experience. But it seems like the back injury was a pivotal moment in your life, as it would be for anyone. And the Western doctors, Western medicine said, you're never going to walk again. You are going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. What happened? What led up to that? And obviously, all sorts of emotions and thoughts go into this. And these are authorities. These are the people who are in the know, right? They're supposed to be the trusted ones. Tell me what led up to that, what happened, and then how you kind of navigated through that.
Okay. Well, you're absolutely right. It was the most pivotal moment of my life. It was a great moment and it was a bad moment at the same time. And I also want to say those medical professionals who told me that I would never, possibly never walk again, and definitely would never have a physical career again.
Yeah.
Were doing so out of the goodness of their heart. That's what they truly believed, and I hold nothing against them. That's what they've been trained to think when they saw the data that was in front of them.
Right.
For me, when I was a young man, my goal was to be a stuntman and a fight director and have a very physical career. And I was going for my black belt in Taekwondo, and I was in just really phenomenal shape. And back in those days, I had Fabio hair as opposed to the Telly Savalas hair I have now.
Right. You and I go to the same barber.
There you go. That's not a bald head. That's a solar panel for a love machine. Anyway, so the next thing that happened was a buddy of mine said, hey, can you come over to my house and help me unload my van? And to me, at that point in my life, I was always looking for the next workout. I was always very physical that way. And this guy was a professional potter, and his van was full of 80-pound boxes of clay.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, this is going to be a great workout. So I went out to his house, climbed up in the van, picked up the very first box, twisted to set it outside of the van, and my spine broke in two.
Oh, my goodness.
The upper part of my spine literally cracked off the lower half of my spine, and I collapsed and was paralyzed.
Oh, Lord.
They took me to the hospital. The doctors told me, he says, John, you have a condition known as spina bifida occulta. And I said, Gesundheit, because I had no idea what that meant. He said, basically 3 of your vertebrae never formed properly at birth. And with the extra weight and the twisting action, you literally cracked the top half of your spine off the lower half of your spine. And then he said words that no martial artist ever wants to hear. You may never walk again, and you definitely will never have a physical career in your life. So start looking for a sedentary job now.
Yeah.
Now, when a doctor says that, your family will start mirroring what the doctor says, because they're well-intentioned, of course. They don't want you to get your hopes up and in a direction that'll never happen. But a very dear friend of mine gave me a book at that exact time called The Tao Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. And it sounds like almost like a cruel joke to walk into a hospital room and give the martial artist who was just told he'd never do martial arts again a book written about martial arts by the greatest martial artist that ever lived. Right? It seems like a really cruel joke in a sense, but it was the best thing that could have happened because that book is about his philosophy of martial arts. And Jeet Kune Do is a philosophy more than it is an actual style because it's always talking about being adaptable and moving forward. And I found out later that Bruce wrote that book when he was himself was in a hospital in
Yes, sir.
traction.
Yep.
And so, it was a very apropos book for me to read at that time. But a couple of things I took out of that book were first of all, the concept of being very present, staying very much in your present moment, being not tense but active and prepared. And the second thing I took was mental flexibility, being like water. As you come to a rock, you flow over, through, or around, but you don't stop. You're still going to that eventual goal that you're going for. So I started just deciding that those doctors who were well intentioned, were giving me a belief, and that belief in my present moment was going to create something in my experience if I took that belief. So I decided to take my own belief rather than theirs. And I decided today I'm going to leverage this small present moment as Bruce would do. And I'm just going to start fixing myself. And I started with my neck. And I just started working my neck and flexing my neck muscles. And over the course of a couple of weeks, I worked my way down my back to all various muscle groups in my arms and the whole bit. And then about 3 weeks in, I actually flexed my hips, which was below the injury. And then at a month and a half, I was able to sit up. At 6 months, I was able to walk around. At a year, I was pretty much back to what you would consider a normal physicality, but I was not back to my rock hard masculine self. But at a year and 6 months, I was back to my rock hard masculine self. And I gave myself a gift. And that gift was that I climbed up on top of a 3-story tower and jumped off
Oh my
and
goodness.
landed in a fall pad. I then went on to do over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting stunt shows all over the world, including 6 USO tours on the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan, where I did over 100 shows. And I went on. I did movies. I worked in Hollywood. I worked with stars. I climbed Mount Sinai. I climbed Machu Picchu. I swam through the blue lagoons of Iceland. I've been to 30 countries now around the globe. I've done everything I've ever wanted to because of that accident.
Wow, that's a lot to take in, obviously. But let's go back. So you did this all after the accident.
After the accident, just like Bruce Lee, he did all the movies we know him for after his accident.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And he
Right.
didn't even want to name his martial art because of that. He didn't want it to be limited by a name or terminology.
Right, and it's called the way of Jeet Kune Do, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. It's a way. It's an inspiration. It's a philosophy. And to me, that was my whole thing, was the philosophy and the philosophical thought of what are we and what do we create into our experience. Buddha would say, what you think you become, you create your world. But Krishna would say, you are the culmination of your thought. And Jesus would say, as a man thinketh, so is he. And it's
Right.
like that. It's a universal truth that our thought is creative. And what's really fascinating, if you really want to dive into something interesting, Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, created a new science called noetic science. And what happened was noetic science was invented because when he was coming back from space, coming back into the atmosphere, he had a transcendental experience which he couldn't explain. So he started studying spiritual experience and trying to magically create it scientifically explanation of it, right? And
Yeah.
so when he started studying the concept of thought, they found that they can actually measure thought waves. And the interesting thing was, the thing that they're really fascinated by is your thought waves, when focused, stop at the point you're focused on.
Yeah.
The waves don't pass that point. And not only that, they know something's happening there, they just don't know what it is. But something is creating. So your thoughts are truly creative, and that's what science is now starting to prove.
It's fascinating. I've done some reading on this as well. Joe Dispenza,
Yeah.
in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and I had long ago. I don't remember that it was a Japanese scientist. This was probably 20 years ago. That he was doing studies with ice crystals
Yep.
and thoughts and words spoken upon the ice crystals. And angry words would literally disrupt the ice crystals. It no longer had a crystal form. And happy, positive words, joy, love, etc., would affect it and be a beautiful, under a microscope, be a beautiful crystal, or the opposite, kind of a broken up crystal. But they also went to a lake that had all this pollution and moss, and all these people, 100 people, 200 people, holding hands, thinking positive things to the lake, and it started literally healing the pollution and the moss in the lake. It's fascinating. And so that brings us back to ourselves, and that we're energy. We are not just the bodies. The body is something we experience, but we aren't the body. And so all these emotions get trapped within us. Thoughts get trapped, limiting beliefs, obviously. So let me ask you, I had, and a lot of people suffer from chronic illness, chronic fatigue, chronic, injuries. And often they're coupled with emotion, right? When you stub your toe, you don't hold on to it emotionally. It's a 5-minute thing and you move on. But when you have a more chronic or eventful, traumatic event, we hold on to that. That energy doesn't move through us. It gets trapped in our thoughts, in our belief system. So I had a motorcycle accident 20, 30 years ago, riding in New York City, living down there. Not a great place to ride a motorcycle, if anyone is listening and doing that. And some people walked out in front of me. I had to go down on my right side, really landed hard on it. And at the same time, emotionally, I was going through something very serious as well. And I was losing belief and faith in myself as a writer. It was really a dark period. And so I was riding that night in a really foul place. And I crashed, only real accident on a bike I've ever had. The cop said to me, after they had arrived, we find guys like you usually like bags of sand after an accident. And so there's all this trapped energy, trapped emotions, regrets, disappointments. And then I'd had meniscus surgery a few years ago, and then I had re-injured the knee, and no Western doctors have ever really been able to figure out what's wrong with it. It doesn't come up on any of the MRIs. And there's a belief between my wife and I, you've actually met my wife, Jennifer Dawn, that it's just all this trapped energy, trapped beliefs. Let's talk about that, because that's something I think a lot of people suffer from. And what would you recommend how they move through it?
Well, I'm gonna come at it from a very esoteric sort of way, because I have a very, very strong belief about this. I truly 100% believe that we are what we believe, and if you believe things are trapped within you, then they are. And so the concept of the creation of self is all about what we believe about ourselves. So, for instance, when I moved to Ohio, I didn't want to move to Ohio. I moved here because my ex-wife brought my son to Ohio. I grew up in a beach resort, and I didn't want to come to Ohio, to say the least. And I got here to Ohio, and I said, okay, I need to, and that's I kind of pause here because this was at a different time of my life. I no longer use the word need, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I need to, at that time, find a steady source of income while I'm still doing my speaking and my comedy show. So I decided very clearly that I'm going to be a college professor. And so I started focusing my belief on, I'm going to be a college professor. And the more I stayed focused on being a college professor, and I'll come back to the injuries and all that in a second. This is just a story to explain this. So I started focusing on being a college professor and believing that I was going to be. The next thing that happened was I got hired to choreograph fights for a play called My Favorite Year at one of the big local theaters here. And there's several sword fights in that play. And I went in and I did the sword fights. And the guy who was the star of that show said, "Hey, you're a really good fight director. Have you ever thought about teaching like a master class? Like come in and teach one course, one class?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And he said, "Well, I'm the dean of theater for Oberlin College." So I went out and I taught one class for him. And then after I finished the one class, he says, "I wanted to see how well you taught. Would you like a semester?" and I taught there for 8 more years.
Mm.
So my belief is what created. Now, when my back was damaged, I could take the doctor's belief, and if I took that doctor's belief, I swear to you, I would not be here right now. I would be dead by now,
Yeah.
because my body would have just given up on itself. But because I chose my own belief, I went on to do over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting stunt shows. And, to everybody who was looking on, that was impossible. But, your belief. So if you have chronic situation, the first thing I would say is it's going to sound funny, be born again. Start stacking present moments that are different from your past, because if it's chronic, and I'm using the quote symbols there, if it's chronic, it's because it's a subconscious belief that you're working from.
Mm-hmm.
And that subconscious belief is just recreating. And
Yeah.
so you can change your belief at any time. And if you want to look at it from a quantum physics level, when you hold your hand up in front of your face and you look at your hand, according to Einstein, that hand is nothing but an energy event, not even a solid, just an energy event.
Right.
That's what all those atoms are. But the air between your eyes and that hand are the same thing, and so are your eyes. The only thing you really are manifesting into your experience is your thought. And if you can create your thought into a place, there's a famous story about Hindu gurus who would come to a river, and the river was raging and they couldn't cross the river. And what they did, it's right in the old text. What they did was they projected their consciousness to the other side of the river and manifested their body on the other side of the river and kept walking. Right. And
Right.
because they understood that they are the thought, not the body.
Right.
And so they would, and now I wish I could do that. I'd be going to Maui right now, but
Right.
and who knows, maybe we all can do that. It's a matter of
Well, perhaps astral projection will bring you there. Yeah.
Right. Maybe astral projection is simply the first part of it.
Yeah.
You astrally project yourself somewhere, and then you take the next step of manifesting the body around your astral projection.
So you have the visualization, and then you have, everyone talks about the law of attraction, but the law of attraction is not me just saying, hey, I'd like $1 million or whatever it might be. It's a visualization, it's an emotional, but it's also an energetic frequency that has to match with where you are. So you can't say, I want great love, but be in a miserable place. It's not going to happen.
Right. As Gandhi would say, you have to be the change you want to see. So
yes, sir.
If I want love in my life, I have to be love first. One of the greatest compliments I ever got from a performer, he says, John, I came and watched your show. He says, and I've watched lots of shows. He says, and a lot of times the performer will come on stage and they'll spend 15 to 20 minutes to warm the audience up. He says, but you walk on stage and they just love you. Why is that? And I said, because I love them first.
Yeah.
I walk on stage expecting to have a great time with them and working together. When I was in 2000, I spent a month traveling all through Egypt, and I ended up climbing Mount Sinai, which was phenomenal. But on that trip, everywhere I went, I was treated like an absolute prince. But that's what I was giving. I treated everyone with respect, because that's the way I believe you live your life.
Yeah.
And so I was having a great time. I was getting gifts. People were like just throwing themselves at me to be really nice to me. To give you an example, when you climb Mount Sinai, you start climbing at 1:00 in the morning. And when I started climbing at 1:00 in the morning, the reason you start at 1:00 in the morning is because you reach the top at sunrise. And so you're on the top of Mount Sinai watching the sunrise over the Sinai.
Wow.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
So 1:00 in the morning, I start climbing. At 2:30 in the morning, so I've been climbing for an hour and a half, I hear on the side of Mount Sinai in the darkness, I hear, John, which was kind of trippy if you really think about it.
Right.
Being on
You
the
thought
side
you're
of Mount
hearing
Sinai.
voices.
Yeah, on the side of Mount Sinai.
Right.
Right. But it wasn't God.
God?
It was yeah. It was the manager of the hotel climbing the mountain to give me his coat because he thought I'd be cold.
Wow.
That's how I was treated.
Yeah.
So the next day I came down from the mountain.
You bring love, you receive love.
Right. And the next day I came down, I went to St. Catherine's Monastery. I'm walking through there and I hear this voice say, hey, are you American? And I said, yeah, I'm American. He says, have you been having problems since you've been here? I said, no, everybody's treating me like a prince. He says, everywhere I go, people want to fight me. And 5 minutes later, I wanted to kick that guy's butt.
You also wanted to fight him.
Yeah. That's what he was putting out. And he kept saying, I'm a martial artist. I'll kick all their butts.
Yeah.
I was a martial artist too, but I wasn't putting that out. I'm here to fight you. I think a martial arts is more of a mental discipline than an offensive style. You know what I mean? And so when I look at him, that's all he cared about was being the tough power guy. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'll be loved because that's what we're supposed to be. Love one another.
He had his ego, right, saying I'm tough, because deep down he was scared. Clearly, he was scared, bringing that fear with him to wherever he went.
And that is the struggle of life. In Sufism, they talk about the God being on one side of a veil and we're on the other side of the veil, and our life is the struggle against the veil. And when they talk about the veil itself, the veil is fear. That's what they say, right? And God is love. God is the pure essence of love, which is exactly what John the Apostle said too. We have that struggle. I'll tell you one of the most fascinating things that I find when I study my spirituality, can combine it with neurolinguistics and hypnosis and all the brain science, is in Buddhism, the most famous Buddhist quote is life is suffering.
Right.
But when you take the word that they translated to suffering, it's dukkha. And dukkha does not translate to English well, because it's a broader concept that has three very distinct translations. And when you read the three translations and then combine them, you get a broader meaning of what that actually means. The first translation is pain or suffering. The second translation, get this one, is habitual response. And the third one is past experience. And so basically what he's saying is life is pain and suffering because of habitual response, because of our subconscious beliefs.
Yep, absolutely.
And so when you're going through a pain and you have a chronic anything, you are going through your pain and suffering of your habitual responses because of your belief and your subconscious belief of pain and suffering or the chronic illness. And, I'm standing here, I'm sitting here right now, but I'm in front of you today, and I still have spina bifida occulta. It didn't magically go away, but I have defied all the odds, and I've done everything they told me I never would do, because I have that belief that I can do that. And so if you want to carry a chronic illness along with you, I don't ever have back issues. And I never do. And, your body may be formed in some certain way. Now, if you're a believer in reincarnation, I could have had a back injury in another life that caused this, if you believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
Or it may just be a simple birth defect. It really doesn't matter, but it's my belief about my experience that's creating my experience.
Yeah, I've had chronic back issues, leg issues, and it's curious because it's all in landmark periods of my life that there was struggle and something disheartening that had taken place, and coincidentally it coalesced in some physical attribute.
Right.
But to get back to what you're saying, we've been studying this gentleman, Sadhguru, and he was saying about these compulsion. When you have the compulsion of sort of an unconscious thought, it's you're not conscious. You are simply repeating. It's that old line of, if you repeat yourself, and expect something different. Well, it's not going to be different because you keep repeating yourself. This compulsion of this pain, this suffering, this trapped belief of some suffering, some disappointment, some regret. You keep living that existence. Doesn't matter if time keeps ticking along. This is your existence. So let's move on from here. I mean, it's a fascinating topic. Obviously, we could go on for hours, days, lifetimes, speaking about relinquishing this. This is why the Buddha is not suffering, because he's relinquished this. And if we all relinquish these negative belief systems, these limiting beliefs, these things we developed in childhood of not lovable, whatever it might be, it's all a lie. It's all this perpetuation, these limiting beliefs that we create as our identity, when in fact it is not our identity.
Right. And if you step back, all limiting belief is based in some fear.
Right.
It's a fear. And Buddha says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And so the more we can deal with our fears. Now, the interesting thing is when you talk about fear, you have to think about what is fear. And I ask audiences all over the world to give me a definition, and the audiences always go silent. I mean, it's like it could, and then somebody in the back of the room will go, false evidence appearing real, which is the trope that is going
Right.
around the world
Right.
right
Right.
now, right? And but when you break it down scientifically, all fear really is negatively focused uncertainty,
Mm.
because it's an emotional reaction to some future event that may or may not happen with you focused on a negative outcome.
Isn't
So
it? Sorry. Go ahead.
if you're focused on a positive outcome, you wouldn't be afraid. So it's definitely you focus on a negative outcome.
It's amazing, and at some point, we try to control life.
Mm.
The outcomes, the experience, the ego, the psyche get in the way. And it's because of this paralysis that someone's going to say, hey, you're deep down, you're afraid, you're in pain. And all it does is cause us trouble. So, for instance, I play softball, and my brain's always like, I want to do this and I want to do that. And the ego is trying to control how I'm going to hit, how I'm going to. And all it does is take me out of the experience. I'm no longer in that joyful mindset as I was as a child playing. I can't experience the joy because now I'm trying. It's so important to succeed, this end
Right.
goal, no longer
Right.
in the present.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's the perfect way to say it. I said earlier that I don't say the word need anymore. Right. There are certain words I just don't say in my life. Wanting, needing, hoping, and trying are the top ones. I don't say those words because they're not non-creative in the present moment. Most people set goals and then they feel like they have to struggle to get to them, or they feel like they need that thing.
Right.
All they're really saying about their present moment is they don't have it. Right.
They don't feel
And
enough in the present moment.
right. And the interesting thing is they're never going to get to something in the future, because that's not the way
Absolutely.
it works. The way it works is you stack present moments here and it comes to you. Right. And when you do experience it, it's going to be in your present moment. It's not going to be in the
Absolutely.
future. You can't go to the store next Thursday right now. Right.
Yep.
It's only right now. And if you really break it down, it's really very, very simple, because your past is just a collection of present moment memories. Your future is just a place where you set goals for present moments. But everything happens in the here and now. That's what Bruce Lee was talking about
Yeah.
staying very present. But
Yeah.
in the present, keeping serene, keeping clean of fear and anxiety, and keeping just prepared. You know, I'm going to casually go through life, and I'm going to be prepared for whatever comes along, and I'm going to stay flexible with it, and I'm going to move along. You know, the subconscious mind behind you is fascinating to me because it has two jobs. One is to collect those memories and give you that underlying belief, and two is to show you what you're focused on. I'm a I'm a big Jeep fan, so I drive down the road. I see every Jeep on the road. I see the ones that are parked next to houses. I see the front end of them sticking around the back of the house. I spot Jeeps everywhere. But that's my conscious focus is Jeeps. I love Jeeps.
Yeah.
When I get in my car, I think Jeep.
Right.
And
Do you
so
have a Jeep?
I have one in my garage right
Okay.
now.
All right.
Right now. Yeah. That's my sixth one, actually. Um, but but even that, when I decided to buy my Kia Optima, I searched what kind of car I wanted. I chose a Kia Optima, and I started seeing Kia Optimas everywhere because my
Yes.
conscious focus went there, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing. Negative people see negative stuff because they're focused on the negative. And by focusing on the negative, their subconscious mind is showing them negative, which is making them create a negative present moment, which is stacking a negative moment in their past. So they
Yep.
have this unending treadmill that's just rolling back and forth of negativity. And the only way you break that cycle is to quote unquote be born again, shut down the past and start something new. And the way you do
Hmm.
that is take your thought, word, and deed and make it very present moment active and staying very positive. Because when you focus positive, it'll show you positive. And then you stack a positive moment. Eventually you push all that junk back. My past is an interesting one because my back was the second of what I would consider the traumas in my life.
Hmm.
The first was I had an emotionally abusive and alcoholic father, and of his seven kids, I was the one he didn't like. So I was the one who was getting the brunt of the hate.
Yeah.
And it manifested in the fact that by middle school, I was a complete introvert. I was, I was 265 pounds at 14 years old.
Wow.
I felt like nobody liked me. I felt everybody hated me, and I just tried to be as invisible as possible all the time. And I look at what I've done now in my life. I've stood on stages with thousands of people in front of me. I worked with Brad Pitt and David Duchovny and big stars, and I've been around some of the heavy movers and shakers for some of the Fortune 500 companies I speak to. I've been around amazing people. I've been in front of huge audiences that are very uh, big movers and shakers in the world, and I have no issue with that anymore because I stay very present. And here's the other thing: I don't attribute anything more than myself on someone else. So there's nobody who is higher than me.
Right.
I think of everyone as an equal. There's also no one lower than me. So racism doesn't fall into my category because there's no one lower than me. So I don't have that thought process. I just love and trust everybody in my world because that's the life I want to live. I want to
Yeah.
create a world that's loving and caring and equal. And so that's how I have to be, as Gandhi would say.
How, you mentioned obviously probably low self-esteem growing up and invisible. How did you, a lot of people can overcome that or by pushing it aside and not dealing with it, and it manifests in other ways. Um, all these negative thoughts will create stress in the body. How did you overcome it then? Was there a resilient voice within you, or what did you do at that time?
It's an interesting story. I was actually a friend of mine was really into Renaissance festivals, and he drugged me to a Renaissance festival.
Okay.
And when he drugged me to the Renaissance festival, he said, "We're going to go to the Renaissance festival, but you're going to wear a costume." And I was like, "Oh, because that's not invisible. That's not what I
Yeah.
wanted, right?"
Right.
And not only that was I going to wear a costume, he had a full chainmail Viking
Oh Lord.
horned helmet and all.
Yeah.
So here I was, this big giant guy in this horned helmet, the Viking, and they took me into that Renaissance festival, and suddenly I was the center of attention, and I was getting all of this positive reinforcement all day long.
Mm,
How good you looked, how great you looked,
right.
how awesome you looked. By the next year, I had made my own suit and I had
Yeah.
gone back.
Yeah.
By the third year, I was a cast member. Now, it was really fascinating about this. I became one of the very popular street characters of that Renaissance festival. I was a
Hmm.
character known as Darian the Barbarian. It was just a
Okay.
giant, he looked like a giant Viking killer, but he was a child in the mind. And so
Right.
it was a dichotomy. And I became very popular. But what was really interesting to me was now when I look back, especially, Darian could do anything,
Yeah.
but John couldn't.
Of course.
And then over the course of some time there, I shifted. Eventually became another character named Cyril the Chicken Hearted, the Cowardly Knight,
Okay.
and which was another funny character. Became very popular. I became the fight director of the fair, and but when you have been so repressed, and suddenly you get all this positive reinforcement, then your ego gets out of hand,
Mm,
and it swings the opposite way. And then
right.
I had a struggle with ego for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I was having a struggle with ego, but it was causing turmoil in my friendships.
Yeah.
And over the course of many years, I learned that my ego had to be in check, and so
Yeah.
I started bringing that back. And uh, when I went on to do my hack and slash comedy show, which went all over the world, um, I found that I was really enjoying those shows, but I felt kind of hollow in the fact that I was bringing laughter, but I didn't feel like I was bringing change. And what was happening was after the show, I would sit in the audience and I would just talk to people, and I would find that I could help them break free of their limiting beliefs and getting
Hmm.
outside of their head
Hmm.
and change their experience. So I said, "Now, how can I create a life where I can help as many people as I possibly can, but still do whips and nunchucks and cool comedy stuff and
Yeah.
create something really fun." So I put together the Corporate Action Hero, and that's what I do now. Is I go into and I specifically chose going into corporations because when I look at people friends of mine who are in the corporate world, they it's so dog eat dog, and so they feel so
Yes.
beaten down, and
Cutthroat bottom line. Yep.
right, and their inner power is gone, right? And I find, if they can be dynamic and empowered, I think the companies will grow. And what happened was, when I started bringing that into the corporate environment, those companies that I spoke for started having big changes in their bottom lines, because suddenly their people were not only empowered, but they felt their own purpose of why they were working at that company. Why were they there?
Yeah.
And they suddenly had a purpose and a reason, and then they felt dynamic and empowered. And next thing you know, the companies were changing. So that's how I ended up getting involved in the corporate world and the corporate speaking. But it all comes back to, am I an action hero? The word action means to create motion, start momentum, or to do something.
Mm-hmm.
The word hero is someone who achieves an extraordinary result in service of others.
Mm.
And so my life is all about the service.
Yeah.
And then what I do is I go into and I talk to somebody and I get them to be action heroes and not reaction zeros. I want them to not be living in their reaction, but actually being active and creating an experience that serves.
A few things on that, and I don't remember the Shakespeare line exactly, so I'm going to butcher it. Much more poetic, but he was saying essentially regarding acting. He said, you have the freedom when you act or when you write something. You could say or do anything you want, but when in real life you're unable to do that. But when you wear a mask, you're able to
Right.
free yourself.
Right.
But what you're saying about, I think a lot of people, there is a change taking place, and people are, let's just say, for a lack of better word, waking up. But many people feel powerless. They go to work, their bills left and right, they're busy, 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 and that part of them, that essence, that broader self, is left behind with the responsibilities, the dogmatic, I got to do this and that. And so I think, obviously our education system needs to change, our philosophies on what we're teaching children, to not be homogenized, but to be that individual, their creative self, their broader self, and I think if we tap into that earlier on, we're going to transform the world, blossom as a society. But just by giving people these little threads that you seem to be offering, and it's not, you're just saying, hey, take my hand, hey, we're okay, we're in this together, sort of brings people out of that box, like your friend did for you with the Renaissance Fest. It's like, oh my God, I have joy. My joy exists. I'm allowed to be joyous. I don't just have to be a working putz every day.
And when they shift from being allowed to being I am,
Yeah.
is when their life changes.
Mm-hmm.
Because we live in the I am moment,
Mm-hmm.
not the I will be or I was moment. And Jesus said, whatever you ask in God's name is granted, but Moses said God's name was I am. And so whatever you're saying and believing about your I am moment, about your present moment, is what you're creating into your experience. So when I look at somebody, my goal is to get them to be completely empowered at the end. So when I do one of my big corporate speeches, I go out in my audience, I choose the most timid person I can find and bring them in front of 1,000 people, right? Which is like terrifying for them, terrifying for them.
Yeah.
The first thing I do is, as I bring them to the stage, I smile at them, and at them, not, I don't play to the audience. I am one-on-one engaged with them.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I say, thank you so much for helping me.
Right.
Because now what I've done is I've activated their service. Now they're helping someone.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very different purpose for being on stage.
Yeah.
Then I say to the audience, isn't she a rock star? Because I know empathetically her fear is being in front of them. And the reason she has a fear of being in front of them is because she'll fail, or she won't look good in front of them. Or they'll think something bad about her.
Of course. Humiliated.
That audience goes crazy and goes, yeah, she's a rock star. And they're screaming for her, right?
Yeah.
Always. So I've already negated the fear because they already love her. So there's no way she can, she's going to mess this up, right? So then I start talking about fishing, and over the course of the next 5 minutes while talking about fishing, she learns to crack a whip and take targets out of my hand.
Wow.
Right. And
something out of the ordinary, obviously. Yeah.
Completely out of the ordinary. And,
Yeah.
and there's a process by which I do this. I only talk about fishing. I never talk about whips because I want her in the mental space of positivity or calm, relax.
Mhm.
And when you say whips, people think pain, danger, or frisky Friday night, right? You don't want them thinking those
Yes,
things,
sir.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And you don't want them thinking that way, right? So I pull out I say, I'm going to teach you the greatest way to cast a fishing rod.
Mhm.
You stand right here and I'll get you a fishing rod. And I pull out the whip and the audience, whoa, they laugh. And I look at her and I say, look, we're just using this as a fishing rod because it's the same motion. So I'm negating the mental process, the belief behind what the whip is.
Mhm.
Then I turn to the other side of the audience. I get half the audience to make a fish face like this. They got the gills flapping and the mouth puckering and the whole bit, right? Now she's laughing. And so she's on stage and she's got a whip in her hand and she's laughing, at the people in front of her. I said, just choose which fish you want to catch and cast your fishing rod. And kapow, the whip cracks. And then she does it. I said, catch another fish. I get her to crack it several times so that now I've anchored the fact that she can. Right. And then I said, did you hear it crack? Yeah, you heard it crack. I go, so you already know how to make it crack. No. So what I just did was this I do a hand gesture in front of her for you guys that are listening to the podcast. It's a hand gesture that we all do naturally. When someone gives you a compliment and you get embarrassed by it, you go, oh, stop. And you lower your hand from in front of their face. Just stop that, right? In hypnosis, they call that a wipe. And what the interesting thing is what I did to her in that moment was I said, did you hear it crack? I made her acknowledge her accomplishment.
Yeah.
Right. And then I went, wipe. And with a head nod, positive reinforcement, I said, so you already know how to make it crack. In that 10 seconds, 15 seconds there, I just shortened her learning curve from learning a skill to knowledge of a skill. She's no longer learning it. She now knows it in 15 seconds. Okay. And it sounds like a hypnosis trick, but everybody has this ability. The only thing I changed was her believing it.
Well, it is, I mean, you're disrupting her thought pattern.
Yes.
And you're
exactly
introducing a new one.
Right. Exactly. And then I pull out a target and I hold a target in my hand. And I know at that moment, what's the fear she has? She's going to hurt me. That's the thing that immediately comes out because she's going to fail and she's going to hurt me. That's her fear. So before she can even go there, I say, look at me. You heard it crack. You already know how to make it crack. So now I'm reinforcing and anchoring. And I say to her at that moment, I say, all you have to do is cast your fishing rod right at the target, right at the fish you want to hit, which is right here. I promise you're not going to hurt me. I literally tell her she's not going to hurt me, and if she's in her fear, absolutely she could hurt me. Sometimes you got to lie to people. It's just the way it is. No, I'm kidding. But the interesting thing is that if I can keep her out of her fear,
right,
and I can keep her focused on what she wants to go and relax, but in that moment when she's in front of 1,000 people, her one fear is she's going to hurt me. And I say, I promise you're not going to hurt me. I've just taken that off the table. So what happens next is she casts her fishing rod and she hits the target and that does not touch me. And I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the most fascinating thing in everything I just said. All that happens in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah. She goes from never having touched a whip, because I asked the audience who here has cracked a whip, and I never choose someone who has, because they have a preconceived notion.
Sure.
So she goes from never having touched it to not only cracking it, but taking targets out of my hand, which is considered an expert level with a whip. So what changed in the whole thing? All I did was manage her fear and manage her belief.
Yeah.
And that's all I really did.
And what's fascinating about that is, who is she when she leaves? She's not going to sit cowering in the corner any longer in pain. She's now emboldened, empowered. Now there's a connection. She's almost a little bit of a mini celebrity there at the event.
She had a life-changing moment. And what's really fascinating is the team that know her and know how timid she is.
Yeah.
Are all like, oh my God, I can't believe she did it. Right. And you're right. She becomes a little mini celebrity. Yeah. Now here's one more extrapolation of everything I just did. So 6 months down the road, the team's floundering again. All the leader has to do is say, remember what the whip guy said? Because the whip, being an explosive sound, is a neural anchor.
Yeah.
Right. So they'll remember that experience fully and all of its content fully,
Yeah.
just by mentioning the whip. So that is the trigger that I have now placed in the entire audience. Is
A
that
positive reinforcement or trigger.
Yep. And so that leader says, remember what the whip guy said, fearlessly focus with faith, follow through with flexibility, right? And bam, and next thing you know, they're back on target and they're back moving again.
And it's amazing.
So,
And it get back to what we started with, sort of the limiting beliefs. And now that you've disrupted that, now she kind of has that neural anchor of
yep.
positive. Oh, I can do this. I can do things. I can get in front of a crowd, et cetera.
Right, right.
This is great. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's fascinating to me because I talk to them. I always make sure I go find them after I'm done because
Yeah.
I want to go over and reinforce it again. So I always go and say, you were amazing. You were really great. That was
Yeah.
wonderful. And what I find is they jump out of their chair, they run and they hug me. They thank you so much. To them, it was like life changing because
Yeah.
not only did they do something amazing, but probably more importantly, someone believed they could.
That's the key. That's the key, because if you brought her up there, or let's say even someone with whip experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you were critical, and that's not the way you do it.
Right.
It's the same thing with parents or anything else. Are you allowed to be XYZ? Are you allowed to be this? And you're saying, well, you become it, or I am whatever. And that's the thing. You're opening this channel of energy, this flowing river, and if we only didn't look at people and go, okay, no, I can't,
Mm-hmm.
and just believed the sensations, the energy, the excitement within us, the ebullience, um, it's just such a different world when someone says yes, or when someone says no, when we are vulnerable to them. If you had
Right.
listened to your doctors who said, nah, you're done.
Right. Right. I would be done right now. I would be done. I'd be done. And when I became a fight director, I started out as a guy who wanted to do fights. But at that point in my life, I was coming out of the emotional abusive relationship with my father. The next person who made an impact on me was a man named Brad Waller, who was one of the top fight directors in the country.
Hmm.
And he saw me doing fights, and he came to me after the season of the Maryland Renaissance Festival. He came to me and said, John, he says, I see talent in you as an actor and a combatant, and I really want to be a part of your growth. And he gave me his training for free.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so this was a positive reinforcement that took me to another level, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how, and actually I credit Brad with a lot of the work that I've done in my life as well, because Brad became the founder of an organization known as the International Order of the Sword and Pen, which brings together fight directors from all over the world every other year in Banff, Canada, for a big giant workshop called the Patty Crane Workshop. Patty Crane was Errol Flynn's stunt double, who I luckily enough had a chance to have a couple classes with, which I thought was fascinating. But without Brad, I wouldn't be friends with F. Braun McGash, the fight choreographer for the Highlander TV show, or Kyle Rowling, who did stunt doubling for Count Dooku
Oh, is
and
that
General
right?
Grievous, and actually, if you watch one of the movies, he's actually in there as a named Jedi Knight named Joe Claude Donva. He has his own action figure, right? So I have all these friends and all these experiences and all these new opportunities because someone was kind to me.
Yeah.
And someone took me to a new direction and put me in a new place.
Yeah.
To me, that's fascinating. I'm going to in January. I'm going back up to Canada for another entire workshop. That's not even a stage combat workshop. It's an organization that bring laughs around the world for charity, and they sought me out to go do it because of the fact that they knew who I was, and that all comes back to the connections I made through Brad.
Well, the world obviously needs more laughter, more joy, more levity,
Isn't that,
more, a
isn't
little
that true?
lighter. But it's also, to go back a little bit, to use synchronicity or whatever word you want to use. You went to this Renaissance, which opened up something within you, and then doors started opening. You trusted enough to go to that, and then people started meeting you, and you started reaching out, and you started traveling down this path. And it's a fascinating thing. One step led to the, you could never, the mind, the ego could never say, this is the way it's going to work.
Right.
It's not going to work that way. You don't know anything about the future.
Well, you want to know? I want to hear a real synchronistic story. This one's fascinating. I wanted to take our show all over the world, our comedy show, Hack and Slash, all over the world. That was my goal. I was like, I want to make this a touring show all over the world. And the year I set that goal and put that intention out and knew that I was going to do it, I had my belief and faith put right behind it. On September 8th, 2001, look at that date, September 8th, I was stepping off stage at the Maryland Renaissance Festival right there in Annapolis. And these two guys walked up and they said, hey, we've been fans of yours for years. Would you like to do USO tours? We're from the Pentagon. And we'd love to.
Wow.
So on Sunday, September 10th, we dropped our packet off at their office. Oh, Lord. Right?
Yeah.
Next day was September 11th, right? Of course. They shut down all their offices.
Yeah.
They called us up 3 weeks later because they shut down to move things around because of the attack. And they said, how soon can you go? We said, we'll go immediately.
Yeah.
And that year that I put out the intention, I wanted to tour traveling the world. I went to 16 countries with the USO. Iceland, England, Norway, Germany, Belgium, Holland, and then Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, I believe. Right. And I kept saying, however many, there were 16 countries. And they kept sending, we kept going out and we kept seeing all the new things. And then my desire for service kicked in, and I realized that, the first tour was really mainly Europe. And the first tour was great because as people were being transferred over to Afghanistan, they were on these bases and sleeping in hallways. And so we were actually serving them right where they needed us to serve.
Yeah.
The second tour, they sent us to Europe again, but this time everybody was already in theater. So we were, people, when you're stationed in Europe, you don't stay on base for entertainment because you're in Europe. Right. So you go out. Right. So the second tour was kind of like, okay, we're doing another show and, 7 people will be here, whatever. So I kept telling our host that you need to send us further down range because we need to go where we can be of true service.
Yeah.
And the third tour, I found myself standing on the flight line in Fallujah, Iraq, next to a colonel. And I said to him, I kept telling him to send us further down range. And I finished the word range, and off a quarter mile off to my left, a bomb blew up. Right as soon as I finished the word range, boom, he turned, he says, son, you can't get further down range. Yeah. And we ended up doing all the way out. I did a show within 8 miles of the Syrian border in the Anbar province. I was the places that we did shows that the actual bases didn't have dining facilities because they were targets.
Yeah.
But it was all about, my goal was to travel and tour this show, but also be of service.
Yeah.
What did I manifest into that creation?
Yeah.
Exactly what I put out.
Yeah.
You never know how it's going to turn out. You never necessarily know how it's going to manifest, how it's going to come into your experience. You just have to be open and flow like water.
Yeah. And the saying goes, you can't be selfish when you're of service to others. Your heart opens. It's closed when you're just worried about yourself. What am I getting? But when you're of service, the heart opens naturally like a flower, or closes if you're being selfish. I don't want to keep you all day. I could talk to you for days, weeks.
This is a lovely conversation. This is wonderful.
My sister actually lives in Ohio, so maybe I'll come visit you one day. But
oh, cool. Where in Ohio?
She lives in both Columbus. She used to live in Akron. And she's got a house on the lake, also Lake Erie.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Or Ashtabula area or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Like up near Geneva.
Something like that. But no, yeah. So I've been to Akron and Cleveland and all that. But so who knows? Maybe I'll come visit you. We'll have a beverage. But I don't want to keep you all day. I'm sure you got many things to do. But I did want to ask you the 5F system of achievement. What does that stand for?
Fearlessly focus with faith, follow through with flexibility. And what that system does is it hacks that fight or flight response to break you out of your fears to achieve more. And I can go for another hour on what the 5Fs are and how we do that. But um, if I was to knock it down really quickly, overcoming your fear is literally a matter of you realizing that it is uncertainty and that you exhale and release the tension of it, because that when you're in the tension of it, your body is holding air, which means you can't feel like you can't breathe.
Yep.
But when you exhale and release, you suddenly turn off the fight or flight response and turn the cognitive thinking back on. Next thing is to get positively focused on a goal. So you're aiming towards a goal. So you get fearlessly focused. You have to believe that you're going to achieve it. So you have to have that faith. So fearlessly focused with faith. The next step is just to simply take small actions. Start stacking present moments positively. So that next one is follow through. And then the last one is the one we kind of started our whole conversation on, which is flexibility. Staying very flexible when things come up that seem contrary to what you're trying to achieve. Realize that you're focused on a goal, and if something comes up, it's because your subconscious mind is showing you the things you need to address to get to your goal. It doesn't show you things that are going to stop you. So you have to keep your mind flexible enough to go, okay, because just like those Jeeps that I saw, this thing came up because I was focused on the positive outcome. And that positive outcome is coming to me and surrounding my experience, depending on what I do right here and right now.
Beautiful stuff, John. I can see the
Thanks.
love in your eyes. You wouldn't say that usually to a man, but I can see the love. You can see the essence of what you bring forward.
I believe that we are supposed to be love. That is my honest to God life. I am I am John, the beloved guy. right.
And maybe don't say that to too many people, but
right. But I'll tell you what I do want to do. I want to make sure your audience gets this free gift I have, and it is a free gift.
okay.
I will not even take their email address, because I
Okay.
believe that today is about bringing value, not taking from.
Yeah.
And it's my 5F workbook. It'll take you through your own 5F, breaking through your fears, setting goals, and moving forward process. And the way you get that is corporateactionhero.com/gift. And if you're looking for me in general, you just go to corporateactionhero.com. You're going to find my LinkedIn, my Twitter, all that stuff. I also have the Interaction Hero podcast. And I do a daily vlog, which is both on my website and on YouTube. So you can find it there as well. And if you really are into the spiritual aspect of what I do, I have my super secret spiritual podcast that I do with Tamara Zoner, the happiness coach, called Spirit Cafe Podcast. And it's spirituality without guilt or the dogmas of religion.
I will have to check all of that out because it's, again, very nice meeting. And part of why I have this podcast myself, I'm a writer, but the podcast is also about, for me, making connections. It's not just really about interviewing people, though that's obviously what I'm doing. Because what is it? Strangers are strangers until they become friends, or whatever the expression
Right.
is. I wouldn't have known you or met you any other way, or and that's what this is about: is making connections.
Right. And for me, that this new platform that came out, Podmatch, has been tremendous, because I've met amazing people.
Yep.
Amazing people on Podmatch. There's people on there who, when you hear their stories, you're just blown away by what they're bringing to the game. I was fascinated, on my own podcast, Interaction Hero. I've had amazing people coming on as guests. It's been tremendous.
Yeah. So again, John Davis, Corporate Action Hero. You can find him at www.corporateactionhero.com. And you do corporate speaking and speaking wherever.
What I'll say about my speaking is, when I come in, I bring an experience. I don't bring any PowerPoints or projectors or screens. It's an in the room, right there, present moment experience. And it's fun, it's interactive, and they will walk out of there. And actually, the last thing that your audience will do in one of my programs is they will scream that they are action heroes, and they'll leave that room charged, and they'll be talking about it the rest of the day.
That's what we all need. We all need those moments every day.
Yes.
To make us feel alive, to make us find that purpose again of why we even exist.
And right now, as we're coming out of COVID, it's fascinating to me, because I watch my career from, okay, how are we affected right now? And right now, I'm getting booked like crazy, because we're coming out of a time of adversity, a time of stress and anxiety, and we're going into this place where we've got to get that power back going so we can create new momentums. And so right now, I'm starting to get booked like crazy because of the fact that it is needed right now. A lot of companies will give motivation at the time when they're riding high and they feel like they can spend money, but that's not when the people need the motivation. They need it right now when it's happening.
Absolutely. So again, it's been such a treat speaking to you and spending an hour and 15 minutes together.
Oh, has it been that long, really?
It's actually been longer because we were talking before the recording. So
it's a great and easy conversation. You bring a great environment to just converse. I think it's great. Wonderful.
Thank you. Den of discussion, my friend.
Yeah, in the den of discussion.
We need that. I'm going to record that. Don, thanks so much. Have a great day. All right.
All right. Thanks. See you.
Be well. Talk to you soon.
Bye.